in this video. As in the last one, I'm going to have to redo this one because the other one was too long. So I got to keep a better track of my time. What I want to talk to everybody today is the concept of blind culture. And you know, if you look that idea up, you don't really see much on it. The one thing I did see was saying that there wasn't, and I will write that linkage in the note in this video. Just find one place where it discussed the cultural concepts and a definition of culture. I thought that was the one that I saw was very succinct and very easy to read. I don't want to try and bore you at all with this. Some of you may not be interested, but you know, the one thing to think about is if you have a culture, you are an identified entity, which gives you some legitimacy and a certain amount of acceptance, either as a group or even as a subset of a large group of society. And one thing I wanted to say is that most people who write about culture are able-bodied and more specifically they are male as well. So when you look at definitions of culture and look at who describes what is and isn't culture, these able-bodied men are also predominantly Caucasian. So it gives you a framework when you look at who is writing about culture. Those are the individuals who are. When I've looked at information about deaf culture, you know, there's quite a bit. And you know, one thing that there's a lot of, if you look at that information I will post concerning the definition of culture, there's description about customs and values and so forth. There's a lot about communication, language. And my point is not to say that deafness is or isn't a culture, or that blindness is or isn't a culture. But to me, if you are going to determine and make an assertion that there is a deaf culture, then I think there's a good argument to also express that there is a blind culture. And the one concept I want to bring to the forefront as relates to culture is the idea about language. And well, here again, these are able-bodied males and predominantly Caucasians. And you know, when they think about blind people, they think about the ability to speak and hear in a way that's understandable to other people who are not blind and who can hear. But if you know a little or a lot about communication, you realize how much communication is visual. And I know from my own experiences that I miss out on a lot of visual communication simply because I cannot perceive it. And since I cannot perceive it, a lot of it I may misinterpret what I'm able to see, because it is much more limited than what everybody else can see. And so, even though I can hear and speak English, at least sometimes, in a fluent way, it doesn't mean that I am not impacted in terms of my language and ability to process information And that aspect of blindness is, I think, underrated. The sight I do have, I spend a lot of my time interpreting it. And so in situations where other people are looking at each other and looking at the people's faces and looking at surroundings, and I happen to be also colorblind, talk about clothing and stuff. I don't have any of that concept. I'm colorblind. I don't really know what colors mean. I know that color is all linked with certain feelings and emotions, and all these other things that relate to visual acuity, expressions, facial expressions. I have a hard time with that, especially with a whole lot of people, because I have to focus on each person for a longer period of time to interpret expressions. And so all these things, and of course, if you have more severe visual impairments, these things become, the interpretation of facial expressions and so forth become even more hard or impossible if you're completely blind. And so I know as an interpretation thing that I have missed a lot of important verbal cues, non-verbal cues rather. And so I don't get all the information that I need to get, because while people are chit-chatting and looking at each other and walking, maybe a tremendous amount of my energy is spent just not tripping, making sure there's no obstacles in front of me. Is there a change in pavement? Is there a car coming? Etc., etc. And this doesn't even begin to address the whole concept of Braille as a language. And people say, oh well, Braille is not its own language because you can translate everything else into Braille, other languages into Braille. Well, I know very little about Braille, but what I do know is that as you become better at Braille, you figure out your own way of assigning shortcuts to what you mean. And so you have a person who is a beginning Braille reader and somebody who has read Braille for years and is very fluent in Braille, and the beginner person will have a very hard time understanding what the person who is fluent in Braille is trying to convey. Once again, culture is being discussed by people without disabilities and interpreted by the same people. And so if you are a Braille reader, your communication may be limited by the inability of people who cannot read Braille to communicate with you easily in terms of what you're trying to write, and etc. Like I said, my own personal view is I don't think that disability makes a culture, whether it's blindness or deafness. I think it is an aspect of an individual that the greater and larger culture needs to take account of. And further, in my opinion, by assigning the term culture to a disability, it isolates the people having their disabilities from the larger culture, and also it legitimizes that isolation by the larger culture overall. And so therefore, these other cultures, blind culture, deaf culture, other cultures you want to come up with regarding disabilities, the larger culture relegates them to their own isolation. Like I said, it's my opinion. If you have another one, let me know. Keep it constructive, keep positive, and hope you subscribe. Any ideas of future videos, let me know. And until next time, I encourage everybody to keep on walking. Bye-bye.